Hello, welcome back to the Jackwood Football Podcast and welcome to our reflections for October in Sky Bet League One. I'm joined once again, as always, with my co-host for this series, Tom from 4 written all over it. Tom, how you doing, mate?
I'm very well. We've had a fabulous October, haven't we? Mine's probably been slightly more fabulous than yours, but still, it's been a good October nonetheless, and I'm looking forward to getting into the convo, Wardy.
Yes, lots to chat about. We're trying to have different conversations every time we do this. And the beauty of Sky Bet League One is every month provides another set of stories, another set of narratives, angles and takes on different things. And I think October, once again, hasn't disappointed. We begin with Portsmouth, as we always do. We'll do Pompey and then we'll touch on Oxford. And I think, luckily, we normally start with most impressed clubs of the month. And I think at the moment, those two teams naturally fall in that category. So we got a little bit lucky last season. We're slightly different and we'll brush over that quite quickly. Tom, Pompey, how have you found it? How have you found another unbeaten month? It's now 15 games unbeaten. It's now 20 games. Is that right? 26 games.
Yeah. Bang on.
It's always increasing at the moment. It seems at Pompey. It's always quite difficult to keep up to date with exactly how many games you're unbeaten, but it's a very good record nonetheless. How are you finding it, Tom?
Yeah, I sat down earlier on today to get ready to film with you, and I remembered that we open with the Pompey and Oxford chat, don't we? And it made me really happy because it's kind of my favourite thing to talk about at the minute. Top of the league, and if you kind of take the 5 games in isolation of the month of October, which of course we do here on this series, 13 points from an available 15, a near-on perfect record. It's of course slightly tainted by that night in Cambridge on that Tuesday. 4 wins from 5, some dramatic circumstances in some cases. You look at the late goals against the likes of Wickham and that last-minute winner against not Cambridge, didn't score a goal against Cambridge, against Carlisle. And then obviously there's a more comfortable example of a performance in terms of the 2-0 win against Port Vale at Fratton Park. And of course, you know, the literally ultimate example of drama in a League One game, and that Reading one in the weekend just gone. So that to me paints a picture that Pompey can win games in various different ways. We've spoken about it a lot, which in most cases would suggest a group that can do things, that is doing things in the right way. Of course, me and all Pompey fans would be wanting those wins to come a little bit more comfortably, a little bit more easygoing than some of them have been. But that is the nature of this division, as we well know, and you can't expect to be blowing teams away every week. So there's no issues there for me. It's a little in-depth, but I think it's perfect for the Jack Ward Football Podcast channel, so I'll go for it. Pompey have created the most chances and assisted the most goals via open play crosses than every other team in the league. And I knew that I'd get a nod and a sort of a smile from my colleague. That's in large part down to Jack Sparks, of course, and I think that the tenacity of the delivery from him is mainly the reason for that. Joe Morrell, easily our player of the month. He's been outstanding, so team-orientated. He's at his combative best. And you know I love him dearly, Wardy, and I know a lot of people watching this will know that. He's told me himself how much the club means to him and what a privilege it is to lead the boys out, as he has done with the armband in the last couple of weeks. I wanted to touch on Colby Bishop. We may well revisit this later on in the show. I was planning to make a video discussing it, and we've spoken about this in the week, but maybe we'll wait for the season to materialise a little bit more first. Not only do I think he is the best striker in League One, which I think he very firmly is, I also think he's probably one of the best players in the division as well. And Wardy disagrees. We've had a chat about this, and you're not exactly massively on board with that point of view, and we can chat about that in a minute. Last point I would make is, of course, mentality. If you know, from the title of your most recent reflections video at the time of recording, it's probably one of the most major differentials between this season and last. If teams want to come and outfight us, we'll outfight them. If teams want to come and outplay us, we'll outplay them. That's been the message within the group, and as a result, you know, it reflects a team that never knows when it's been beaten. Of course, 31 league games to go. Nothing's ever won in 15 games already, but we've had an exceptional start. Last thing, 4 of the last 6 teams to get at least 35 from the opening 15 league games of a League One season have gone on to be promoted that campaign. 3 of them as title winners.
It sounds good, doesn't it?
It does, good. But it's Pompey, so we all know where that's going to go horribly wrong.
I think I know where you're getting some of the stats from. I'm not going to say where it is because, well, I can say no, because I don't know. I would also say in that article that I think you're getting it from, or I've read a similar article, I believe you are currently matching Plymouth of last season, except Plymouth lost more games than you did. I think you're drawing games, whereas they lost some games. I think they lost 2 at this point after 15 games, but it's the same points tally. You're matching them. And as we know, Plymouth, they had a pretty good season, didn't they? I think they had a pretty good campaign in the end, won the league.
Long way to go.
And of course, are competing in the Championship this season. But like you say, it's a long way to go. And I think you are scarred a little bit. I think we all feel as though we get scarred by this. It's in Pompey style, in Oxford style. I'm sure Bolton and Derby fans say in their style. It isn't quite as plain sailing as we all imagine. And we can read these beautiful numbers and statistics. And based on previous years, we can sort of do that forever. But ultimately, no season can be replicated. No season is the same. And every team is going to have their good moments and their bad moments. It's just about when you time them and if you time them well. Right now, Pompey, it's all a good moment. I mean, there's some difficult moments. I think Cambridge was a difficult one to take, and it was a tough evening, should I say. It was a Tuesday night, wasn't it? But ultimately, you've remained unbeaten. You're in very good shape. And I come back to the mentality, like you say, the video title of the last roundup was title mentality. And that by no means is to say that you are going to win the title. It's clever title work, if I don't say so myself. But it is the mentality of title winners. And I can say that after 15 games because, we're looking at 15 games. Now, you could lose the next 15. Now, that isn't title mentality. What we've seen so far is a mentality that is top notch. And will leave a lot of clubs, as you just said there, with recent history numbers in a very, very good place. And that can only be seen as a very exciting thing. Tom, going into, and again, this is based on October, and we're looking back on the last month, going into next month, or this month, should I say, we're recording this on the 2nd of November. How are you feeling? I understand there's one fixture coming up that is a little bit... I mean, it is concerning Pompey fans. A little bit nerve-wracking, maybe. One fixture in particular. Which one's that?
You know full well which fixture it is. It's Charlton at home's coming over the brow of the hill. We're all a little bit concerned because I think it's like a record that dates back to 2005 when the last time we beat Charlton at Fratton Park. And they've turned us over literally every game we've played them in the last couple of years. But I keep reminding myself that this Pompey team's different, right? And that's been the mantra for pretty much the start of the season when all of a sudden we started realising that actually we're pulling results out of thin air that we, in some cases, maybe don't deserve 100%. And in other cases, maybe we're more deserving of but got less points from. So that there's at least 2 examples I can think of. I'm also bearing in mind, obviously, the Oxford game's now been postponed, which I think maybe comes at a good time for us. We didn't really want to play you with Joe Morrell, Marlon Pack, potentially Paddy Lane, Terry Devlin, Gavin White all out on international duty, and Marlon Pack obviously injured.
We'd have a few as well. It's important to say. I don't think it wouldn't have made as good of a game as it probably could have done. And look, we don't really care, to be honest. If from a bias and selfish perspective, we'd love to play Pompey with 8 of their best players not there, and that isn't very nice. And I'm sure Pompey fans will understand that, and they're the same with us. If we wouldn't have 3-4 of our key players, our goalkeeper would be definitely one, who's a very, very important part of the way we play. You'd be gagging to play Oxford United at that point, in that position with players missing. But like you say, we know for one certainty, next time we play, and the time we play you next, we're going to have 2 teams that are going to have pretty much full strength squads, and that's going to make a very, very fascinating game of football.
And both teams actually will be sat there thinking, yeah, you know what, we kind of don't want to play the opposition when we are not full strength. And I think we both will be heading into that game, so that'd be great. Yeah, no, the Charlton one worries me. That one's obviously been postponed. Blackpool at home as well. I think that's going to be really, really tough. I watched Blackpool against Fleetwood the other night, and to show the resilience and the resolve, no matter where it is, derby, not a derby, local affair, whatever, to turn the game around and be leading 3-2 until the last minute, shows a lot of resolve and a lot of character. And that's something that Pompey prided themselves on. So I think that's a really interesting matchup towards the end of this month. And, Burton away on a Tuesday is never easy either, Wardy, as me and you both know. So it's one of those where, and Burton are going really well, and they're going to come up later on in the show. So it's a tough November. Equally, it was a tough September, and look how that one turned out. That went really well for us, and we managed to go to Barnsley away, beat Peterborough at home, decent point away at Derby. There was a run there where we thought, crikey, Pompey going to completely capitulate here if we're to go off what's happened previously, but we didn't, and I hope the same happens for November. Tell us about Liam Manning's Yellows.
Yeah, it's been a good month. I think when I look back on it, I say it's been good. I think it could have been better. It's not been our best month, but that's because we have been, let's be honest, so good in the first 2. So we have to look at it slightly differently. I think our fixtures have been a little bit more harsh. I think we've had to deal with a few more obstacles, the biggest one being an illness, losing our best player on paper in Cameron Brannigan for 2 games. Arguably 3 came on in the last couple of minutes, in which we clawed back a point against Wycombe. So you look at those different obstacles and different reasons maybe as to why it's been a slightly more difficult month. On reflection, I'm actually fine with it. We started off with a win against Shrewsbury, which was very comfortable. That was 3-0. Bristol Rovers, less comfortable. 3 red cards in there. That was 2-1. Blackpool was difficult to take because of the timing we conceded the goal. I actually think the performance in the first half was one of the best of the season. The second half, that was after the international break. Players got, I think it was an illness around the football club over the international break. Players also came back injured from the break itself. And we were great for the first 45 minutes, but you could see that squad was struggling. And the last sort of 20-25 minutes, we just sat really deep and allowed Blackpool to come at us. And you made a good point in the segment just a second ago about Blackpool. They're going to be a really, really difficult side. I watched Blackpool also this month against Charlton, and they were fantastic in the first half. Second half, they weren't as good. They weren't very good in the first half against Oxford. Second half, very good. And you'd say against Fleetwood, not very good in the first half, fantastic in the second half. So I think Blackpool right now, again, this isn't a Blackpool chat, but definitely something to say on them. They're a little bit patchy, their performance, and they normally are very good in one half, not so good in the other. Against Oxford, that definitely was the case. That ended 1-1. Wigan, we weren't great at all. I think first half, we were fine in possession. And actually, if you look at the performance in possession, without the goals that we conceded, it wasn't horrendous, but we weren't creating enough with the ball that we had, and we did concede 2 chances. One was against the run of play. Second was a stunning free kick, but we didn't deserve to get anything from that game. Wycombe was very controversial. We spoke about it again in length on T-Lop. Definitely go and check that podcast out. By the way, more of this chat every single week with 2 of the other lads, Jake and Ben. We spoke quite a lot about the refereeing standard in League One not being up to scratch. I think in that game we saw a referee lose control of what really on paper looked like a good game of football. And again, 2-2 sounds fantastic, but 3 of those were penalties. And you'd say 2 of those 3 probably weren't actually penalties. So it was, again, controversial, difficult to take. Let's move quickly on because I'm still a little bit frustrated about that one. But we scored in the last minute, so it didn't feel maybe as bad. I'd rather have, of course, got a point from that one. Let's move on. More on that in T-Lop. You can watch that a couple of weeks ago or listen to that a couple of weeks ago, unless you, of course, are a Patreon. The last one was Lincoln. That was Tuesday. Tom, you watched that game.
Yeah, you're awesome. I thought you were awesome.
We were back to our best a little bit. I think we were back to our best. Not our total best, but I'd say dealing with the opposition we had to face, Lincoln, who demolished Charlton a week ago on that Tuesday night after going 1-0 down in that one. They were fantastic, Lincoln. I was worried about them ever since sacking their manager, Mark Kennedy. Their new interim manager, shall I say, Shaw, has come in and definitely, I think, brought a bit of almost freedom to that team, and we've seen that in recent weeks. I was really worried about that on a Tuesday night. The weather conditions were horrible. It was misty watching an iFollow. It was a very, very difficult fixture on face value, and I think the circumstances in the game, losing a player like Sam Long really early on in the match also made it quite, again, difficult to adapt, but we came through. And that's really, really important that we came through and we won that game. That was our game in hand on Pompey. Of course, the results before that mean that game in hand doesn't maybe put us to position in the mix points wise as it once could have done. But I'm not too concerned about it. And I look back on the month and I actually go, in the circumstances, it's still a very, very good month. So yeah, that's how I'd look at Oxford. I'm pleased. I am pleased. I think next month is going to be, again, a very, very interesting one. But after what was a couple wobbly few games, that Lincoln one definitely has eased us a little bit, and I'm impressed.
Have we just managed Pompey and Oxford in 15 minutes inside the start?
Good.
That's fantastic work. Well done, mate. Good effort.
And I think we've spoken about lots of different things within that conversation as well. So that's good. I think we did every Oxford game, and you spoke sort of more briefly, but I'd say on different topics within Pompey. I think we've had a really good chat there. Tom, last word on Pompey before I completely on Oxford before I ruin this conversation in 15-minute segment. You watched the game against Lincoln. You said we looked awesome, in the words of yourself. How do you reflect on it now with a bit more, other than a WhatsApp group chat? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those where 2-0 could have flattered you if you're speaking from a sense of the keeper's fumbled it in the fog for the second. I thought Liam Manning will be really pleased with the first goal. I think it's straight off the training ground. It's a really, really nice header. I just thought we had total control. I think both Ethans for Lincoln just got sucked in a little bit. I don't think it was a case of the away side's game plan prevailed on the night, really. I just think you are far too good. It's one of those where if you catch Lincoln on an off day and you're having a particularly decent day, by and large, it's going to go your way, isn't it? And I feel like that was probably the case on Tuesday night. You mentioned they had a few circumstances, interim managers getting ahead of steam. We had a chat with Jakey during the day today, didn't we? There's kind of whispers and murmurings over maybe a potentially romantic return for a certain previous managerial duo that may or may not have won some silverware up in Lincolnshire recently in their managerial careers. But yeah, I mean, it was having gone 2 games without a win, given the standards that you'd set yourselves, I think it was a classic example of going out there and showing what you could do. And I think Manning will be delighted, although he won't be able to be on the touchline for the next game you play. He'll be delighted with his group of players. I don't know if you saw it, the actual David Prutton and David Stowell, who are two, one of them's the EFL presenter and another one's a commentator.
Yeah.
Did you watch it?
I haven't seen, no, but I know who the two are. I know who they are.
So Liam Manning's their guest this week. I think you really want to go and watch that, because I thought it was a really insightful watch. And he mentioned how he can be prone to overthinking things sometimes and overanalyzing. And it actually, I know the two of them are completely different in terms of their experience, because Liam Manning's literally been a coach for 10 years plus in various different circumstances and different places. And John Messino's fresh into his managerial career. But from listening to Manning speak, I drew a lot of parallels between the two. And if anything, coming out of watching that video, I've made me even more excited to see how the two of them would face off. I know they did at the sort of the back end of last season, but it didn't really feel like either of them had their feet under the table. I think now they've got complete control over their both respective football clubs. That Oxford Pompey / Pompey Oxford game makes for a really good viewing. So yeah, I thought you were really good on Tuesday. And yeah, all of a sudden, and Bolton have got their game in hand next Tuesday, of course, haven't they? So we are, myself and yourself, are going to be looking over our shoulders shortly, where maybe 2-3 weeks ago, it was looking like a pretty comfortable gap to those playoffs. Now, that gap's pretty slender. I'll try that again. That gap's pretty slender. Gap is pretty slender, isn't it?
Well, we said 15 minutes. 18 I've got on my clock.
We'll take that. We'll take that.
That's okay. Two sides doing very well. Another side are doing very well, and another few sides. But I think we'll touch on Bolton. They've impressed you. They've impressed me. They're in a groove right now. I put it as a secondary title to the title mentality of Pompey. I said Oxford and Pompey are in very good shape, but Bolton are chasing and they're in a groove. And you can sort of really see this Bolton team now going on a run, and it's scary from an Oxford perspective, and I imagine from a Pompey perspective as well, even though you've got that cushion. This Bolton team, and we said at the start of the season, even before the first ball was kicked, that squad has got the ability it's got the depth as well to go on a fantastic run. And last season they would have learned a lot from last year, a lot from that playoff heartbreak and that playoff semi-final defeat to Barnsley, where they just didn't really turn up, and there were games across the season where they weren't really being as ruthless, and they were sort of going on decent runs and then disappointingly falling short. You feel as though they could be a team that just hit a run, and you just sort of go, can they be stopped? And we maybe thought at the start of the season when they beat Lincoln 3-0, and I think it was Fleetwood where they won against them as well at early doors, you thought maybe this could be the start of it really early on. Bit patchy, bit passive, you'd say, in performances. But in recent weeks, Tom, Bolton, they have come to life as we expected.
Yeah, they found a rhythm, haven't they? And you mentioned it. It was I wouldn't describe it as a difficult way into the season, but patchy is probably the more optimal word there. I think, bar that uncharacteristic home defeat to Carlisle, they've had a faultless month. If we're talking in terms of October reflections, that first half at Adams Park, that stands out for me. Devastatingly good. We've all had Bolton. We all did have Bolton up there in terms of our League One predictions at the start of the season, with the likes of Dion Charles, as he is, fit and firing, 7 goals in his last 10 league games. They are a real force. As we mentioned just now, game in hand over both our teams, and they're just three behind you boys. And that game, by the time that comes around, they could be level, couldn't they? On the following, is that right? Am I right in saying that? So when they play next Tuesday, you don't play next Tuesday, do you, in the league?
No. So we've got a Saturday FA Cup, then a following Saturday. So we missed that game.
That gap could be literally nothing. That's quite exciting, actually. And yes, they are in a groove. can they be stopped? Really, it doesn't look like they can. And one thing I thought of when you were talking, and this might be quite naive of me to say, and I feel free to slate me, Bolton fans, in the comments, but you remember that team of last season that felt like it had a few stars in there? Bradley, James Trafford, that kind of thing. These big name youngsters from Premier League clubs on loan. It feels like more of a team that is, not saying that last year's team wasn't a team, but it feels like that maybe they're all a little bit more aligned together. Maybe there's less of the renaissance of having Premier League loanees at the club, and now it's more of a. I mean, the summer recruitment was still fantastic, wasn't it? But do you get what I'm saying with that? It's more of a.
They've got, I think, in some more key positions, they've got players that are there for the long term.
Yeah,
I think with Trafford, we always knew that he wasn't going to be, Bolton weren't going to buy Trafford permanently unless they got promoted. But even then, it was going to be a massive task. In the end, he's gone to the Premier League, so that was never on the cards.
Yeah.
Bradley, I believe, is still at Liverpool. I think he is maybe understudy to an understudy of Trent Alexander-Arnold, which I think says quite a lot about his ability. I think he's getting into match day squads every now and again. I'm surprised he didn't go out on loan, definitely to the Championship. But either way, he's part of a very, very good setup, one of the best setups in England. So, you'd say that those two individuals were the standouts in that Bolton team last year. I know what you mean. They remind me, they've got a few more, as Napper's used to say, they've got a few more gems than stars. And Napper's always says it. And I think I know what you mean. They've got a team where you can go, he is a superb 7 out of 10, solid option. And I think in recent we've seen Santos against Charlton. He was exceptional. He's been there quite a few years now, but he was fantastic. You've got players like Sheehan, who just, again, he gets older every year. Of course he does. And you feel like he is eventually going to be too old, but he doesn't. He's still a huge part of that midfield. You've got Morley in there with Sheehan, who are fantastic talents. Dempsey as well. Charles, who again is a striker that still manages to score quite a few goals every single season. He's got his flaws, of course he has, but as a striker, he still does manage to get a good number for Bolton. And we know how important a consistent striker is at a football club. And they've got lots of options in there. I think it was a case of nailing down a few key positions, even during this campaign so far, knowing exactly where you want to play and who you want to play where. Now they've done that, and you can sort of really see a settled 11. With Santos coming back in, their captain, that team looks more of a all-rounded, settled 11. And now, as soon as that settled 11 has occurred and did occur a couple of weeks ago when this run started, you feel much more comfortable about this Bolton team. And like you say, this run now does look really fluid and it looks very difficult to stop. So Bolton, I've been seriously impressed. That squad before the campaign, like I say, looked raring to go on a brilliant run. It was patchy, a little bit slow at times. It's not all perfect, but you feel it's one of those runs where you don't have to be perfect all the time, but you will have perfect games within that. Similar to Pompey a little bit, I think. You've had games in that unbeaten run one where you haven't been fantastic. Cambridge would be an example of that. But you've also had some very standout performances within those, and I think you can be absolutely fine with it. A few other teams, Leyton Orient, unbeaten. Wigan, we mentioned as well. Tom, any more teams you have to throw in the hat?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of impressive sides, you need to shout out all the unbeaten sides this month other than Pompey, don't you? Barnsley, Peterborough, you mentioned Leyton Orient there. Still a few worries over Barnsley's home form for me, but they've played some really top sides at home. We've both been there this season, haven't we? Well, I went, Wardy didn't. Sorry.
Not quite.
Once they sort themselves out, I'm sure they'll be motoring for sure. 11 points from 15. Posh have an identical record to that of Barnsley. 3 wins, 2 draws, one of those being away to Blackpool too. And we've already mentioned Blackpool in this show so far. So, impressive from Peterborough. And I think, not trying to lure you into an apology here, Wardy, but we were probably quite harsh on Wigan. And some would say rightfully so, because they were quite down in the dumps, weren't they? And we were thinking, issues off the pitch, a team low on confidence, is it just a bit of a helter-skelter downwards? But actually, they've come back and really come into their own in the last couple of weeks. Yeah,
I was a little bit harsh on Wigan, but I think on reflection...
And then they went and turned you over.
And then they beat us 2-0 comfortably. I think, to be honest, when I was harsh on them, I feel like I had a reason to be. I think I wasn't impressed with the fact that they weren't playing very well. They just weren't playing very well, and they were getting beaten by teams that, again, there were some difficult games in that tough fixture list that they had at that period. I also felt they weren't turning up against sides they should be beating. And with that squad, I think people are forgetting that Wigan, they had a points deduction based on last season, but their summer window was still pretty busy. They were still able to build a pretty good team. There's depth issues slightly, but their team is they've got a good team there. Still got a very, very talented team with a lot of talented individuals. And I felt that within that run, they could have been performing better and getting better results. They weren't doing so. I think in recent weeks, they have been improving. 3 wins in the month, Charlton, terrible first half, terrible for most of the second half, really, but they picked it up and scored 2 late goals and made it very difficult for Charlton and made it quite a nervy ending. I would say, though, you look at their month overall, they have been good. They have been good, and they've got themselves in a position now where I'm not concerned about relegation. I think, to be honest, Wigan, it looks as though I think, based on what we can see with that team and the results you've got and the performances within that run, even with that difficult set of fixtures, I've seen enough to think that Wigan will probably just be, I'd say, around mid-table. I think that's where they're going to be, around mid-table, and they'll be absolutely fine with that. When you have 12 points deducted before the season starts, you definitely take a mid-table finish. So I'm not concerned about Wigan. I've been impressed by them in recent weeks, and they'll still have their blips, they'll still have their moments, but I've seen some really, really good moments in that side. And again, ironically, against Oxford, there were some really good moments as well. So I'll eat my words on that. Let's touch on the next segment. Well, Leyton Orient, very, very steady as well. Sorry, we should go into detail on the unbeaten teams. Leyton Orient, very good. Peterborough, impressed as well. Leyton Orient, we said off camera in our little briefing before the show, Leyton Orient is down to what you expect from them. I think
sounds very official. It was a quick phone call. It was
very little chat on this segment, really, but we can sound it more professional than it was. I think Leyton Orient have been good in the month, really, really good. And we've got a little bit of a joke on T-Lock that we've got an agenda against their manager, because we always seem to predict Leyton Orient to lose their games, and maybe we should stop doing that, because they're unbeaten in October, and they're playing a very, very certain way. They're getting good results, and like we say, when the team does get promoted, the number one aim is to stay up and stay in the league. And you can say that realistically, Leyton Orient now, I know it's only 15, 16 games, they've again shown a really good account of themselves after this sort of opening 15 matches, and that can only be a massive, massive positive for them. I've been impressed by Leyton Orient, and they've got some really good results already this season, including some key ones in October.
Yeah, no, so just to jump in on Wigan briefly before we go to most underwhelmed clubs. It's obviously never nice to crown a most underwhelming club, but it's an important and integral part of the show, I think. And with the Wigan thing, it's nice with this show. I think it's probably one of the best things about it is that we can go back and we're not flip-flopping between episodes by any stretch, but you can look back and go, oh, well, maybe we were a little bit more negative on them maybe an episode or 2 episodes ago. But actually, on the kind of the balance of it, you end up building a pretty good picture over the course of a season, don't you? So that's always good. Most underwhelmed by, I'm going to go with Reading. They've lost all 5 of their games they played in October. 2 really good finishes from them in our game, pretty much gift wrapped from a sleepy Pompey defence. And then from there, it just felt like they didn't really know what to do with themselves. And it may have been an element of Pompey being at their ruthless best, as I think we were. But it's pretty devastating from our point of view, and it's fantastic to see from my personal point of view. But from a Reading perspective, you must be sat there 2-0 up inside 27 minutes, and then within half an hour of football play be 3-2 down, and you must be a little bit of a sucker punch, or even massive sucker punch. Protests, of course, are unsettling, and I can imagine it's not an easy environment to play football in. Imagine going to work, Wardy, and tennis balls get thrown into your place of work while you're trying to work. It's always no, it's not going to be ideal, and I don't think anyone else would expect that in any other circumstance. And
it would be weird in sort of like an office job, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Balls being thrown at you.
Yeah, or someone came in and threw all the paper from the printer up in the air and started causing, and then someone has to come in and clear it all up. It's like, yeah. Anyway, great office analogy there. So I hope you enjoyed that.
Of course.
They'll take some positives actually from an improved performance level, though, particularly that first period where they scored 2, and those were 2 of their 5 goals this month. So definitely improvement there. If you're Reading, you could probably just about suck it up, losing to, and for legal reasons, I said suck it up there, losing to Pompey and Charlton. But when Leyton Orient, Northampton, Fleetwood all put at least 2 past them, I think it was Leyton Orient did. Northampton put 3 past them, didn't they? Maybe less so Leyton Orient in terms of, because they're going pretty well, and we've already mentioned them in the show so far. But definite for Fleetwood and Northampton, who are in that mix with them, and are the kind of teams where you go into the game thinking, right, we want to get a result here, because these are going to be our kind of fellow escapees, if that's to be the right term to use. I know Ben's pretty keen on, pretty strong on Fleetwood are actually going to stay up, which I think, there's not really much you well, you can argue against them if you want to, but there's not really much you can throw against them, particularly after what we saw last night. They are, at the time of recording, subject to an ongoing non-payment issue, cash owed to HMRC, tax, basically, without wanting to preempt anything. With the likelihood of more points deductions to come, we'll keep an eye on how that continues to develop. But it's a, really topsy-turvy situation right now there, Wardy.
I'd say a few more mentions, and they're not very nice mentions, but Exeter and Port Vale, I think they have fallen off. Tom, you put it on the little briefing. They have fallen off, and I know it's only 15 games. Speaking about teams falling off, feels a little bit harsh and slightly reactionary, but it is the truth. They started very well. We played Exeter at the end of last month, and they were top of the table. It was a top of the table clash, and now we're speaking about an Exeter side that have been brought into relegation conversations after, like you say, a chunk of this season. So again, Port Vale had very difficult months as well. Haven't won a game in the month, and Jake's looking at his prediction of them coming bottom of the table, thinking, well, they might not come bottom, but maybe it's not as bad as he thought it could have been when they were flying in the top six. And we lost to Port Vale at home when they were at the peak of their form. So they have had a slight drop off, and we are seeing a very difficult couple of weeks for those two football clubs. Exeter are a little bit concerned. The amount of goals they're shipping is the biggest one for me. I think at the start of the month, losing 4-1 to Charlton, they got completely outplayed in that one. They've had difficult games. I mean, Charlton, Derby and Barnsley, they are difficult fixtures, but they've been outperformed comfortably in all of those games. And that's, other than Barnsley to an extent, it was only 1-0, but definitely Charlton and Derby, you look at those and you think, they didn't really get a kick. Definitely not a progressive kick. They might have had possession at times, but in terms of creating and looking to take the game to that opposition, they never got a chance. So you reflect on it. And I mean, it started at the end of last month when they lost 2-0 at home to Northampton. And you thought that's really not a good result. Potentially the disappointment of that and the shock of that victory after a pretty strong opening, a very strong opening 12 games of the season. What we've seen since is a side not quite continuing that groove and in that shape. I don't think they're going to go down. They've had injuries. They tend to be quite streaky under Gary Caldwell. I would say that as well. They've sort of won 7 games on the bounce before last season. And it could be a case where this is their difficult run now. And you feel as though that next fantastic run isn't too far around the corner. They're not afraid to do that. But we'll have to wait and see. I hope it does get better. I live with an Exeter fan in my flat. So, for his mood and for the state of our kitchen, if you like, because, sometimes get a little bit. I mean, to be fair, it was okay against. They played Middlesbrough, of course, in the EFL Cup, but at one point, look, they were going to cruise through against a championship position. It wasn't the case in the end. It looked like that was going to be a pretty happy place to be, just around the corner there outside my door. But as it comes to league form, not so.
Are you closest to the kitchen?
I'm not. I'm literally opposite him, but I can imagine that. Well, I'm in there a lot of the time with him, and when they don't win, it tends to be quite a difficult place to be. But we've all been there. But just for that sake, really, I just hope they turn it around. Let's move on to some more individual awards now. Oh, no, Club Surprise Package. Then we move to the individuals. Club Surprise Package. Tom, you laugh again, and I feel as though we're going to do this show. How many times we did it every month last year? We're 3 months
just the way now. You say it when you go, right, let's move on to clubs. Oh, no, we've got to do surprise package. It just always tickles me.
I think it's because I don't laugh or crack a smile.
No, and I do. That's just the way it is. Sorry, go on.
I think it's because I wrote it, maybe, and you haven't quite. I wrote it thinking it was a good name, and to be fair, it does say what it is on the tin. Really,
it does. It really does. But it's the connotations that does it for me. But go on.
Yeah, it was better than Jack's surprise package that we had. I think briefly. I think we changed it.
We did. Yeah, we did have Jack's surprise package, and that very quickly had to go because of the potential ramifications. Our surprise package. That's even worse. The surprise package would probably go to Burton Albion, and I think 10 points in 15, 1 defeat all month. Fabulous 4-1 win over Bristol Rovers. Have taken 3 points off both Cambridge and Lincoln, Northampton and Cheltenham to come off as well, of course, the next few league games. So despite, I think it might not have even just been me, but we were saying on T-Lop that Burton would probably be, I did say on one of the T-Lop extras that Burton would probably be the team that I would perhaps change the most in my predictions at the start of the season. I'm not so sure about that now. 6 points off the playoffs, cracking season so far. I don't know what I was thinking when I said that. Obviously, they maybe had a little bit of I think I went like 10th, 11th, 12th, somewhere along those lines, which I think you probably did the same. And actually, it looks like a season when they're going to finish that. And they're starting to reap the rewards of what I mentioned at the time, which was that really impressive transfer window in the summer. which a lot of us thought outside the Pompeys and Oxford windows that were all chatting about loads. That next step down was probably, wow, look at what Burton have been doing in
them and Stevenage, I remember, with sort of the two, weren't they? Them
exactly. And they are both going really well, aren't they? Which, proof's in the pudding. What does John Messina like to say? Fruits of our labour. That's the one. Fruits of our labour. Yeah, he loves that.
Go-to.
To be fair to him, and I don't want to slag off a very, someone who I admire and respect massively, but Danny Cowley did have a massive songbook where he would literally just pull different phrases and just combine them all together.
I mean, Lee Johnson tends to do that as well.
Lee Johnson does that. Danny did that, but would say the same thing to everyone, but make it sound like he was saying something brand new and fresh, which I thought was a little bit tiresome. Whereas with John Messina, sorry to go off on a tangent, but you do get yes, he says the same thing to every press outlet after the game because he gives his thoughts on the game and his thoughts were always the same and always very consistent. But his delivery, he doesn't have these catchphrases. Paul Cook has loads of them. Kenny Jackett used to have loads. It's quite fresh and refreshing. I would also say, Jack, surprise package. Maybe this is a little bit disrespectful to Cheltenham and they shouldn't really maybe be in surprise package. But 2 wins from 5 in the month of October, given the start of the season they had and that horrendous run where they just couldn't score for the love of money, that's starting to look a little bit more positive in they don't like calling it Gloucestershire, do they? Cheltenhamshire.
I think the new manager coming in, Darryl Clark, was a massive boost. And what we've seen since as a football club that have seen a real bounce from a new manager. It didn't happen in the first game. The first game was against Fleetwood, wasn't it? And Fleetwood won that game. And you sort of thought, that wasn't the reaction. That wasn't fantastic. But when you look at their fixtures, like you say, 2 wins from 5 in this month, there has been a boost. I think it just took a little bit of time. I think they were so bad that the traditional managerial boost didn't quite work. They had to have sort of a double boost, and now we are seeing that. Maybe that's how it works now. If you're horrendously bad, it takes a little bit of time, and then you eventually will get that boost. And maybe Lee Johnson, he lost 3-0 at home to Oxford in his first game, and then you'd say that Fleetwood have improved. They definitely have improved. So maybe that is the case. A few other chats as well on teams that maybe have surprised us have been surprise packages. I need to stop saying that. Even I'm laughing now. For the good and the bad. I think we've sort of seen quite a few clubs that have done maybe worse than we thought. I think, again, we have to put teams like Reading in there, and we're almost touching the underwhelmed section of it as well. I think Carlisle have been a little bit patchy. We'll touch on Derby as well. I think Derby, they're surprising me because they haven't hit that run yet that I think we thought they would do. And I thought they would hit a run. I think they've got a squad. They've got a manager that traditionally does hit a good run after a period of time. With Rotherham, Paul Warne did tend to have slower starts and then hit a run. 15 games in, and that run doesn't look like it's near. Even when they win 4-0 against Northampton.
Maybe we've seen it just start. Perhaps we've seen
it
start.
Or maybe last week we thought it started, and maybe the week before, or maybe the week before that, and then
doesn't make it a run, then does it?
It doesn't.
The thing.
So it's tough, isn't it? We might have just seen them win 4-0 against Northampton, who are a side that very rarely this season, I think only on a couple of occasions, have lost by more than 2 goals, and it's a fantastic scoreline. They're rampant against Northampton,
and they were excellent as well. They were
very, very good. But it's really, really tough to sort of know if that is the start of a fantastic run that, Derby do need. I think Derby do need that run, because this run they currently do find themselves on isn't sustainable. And if they have those expectations they set in pre-season of getting themselves out of Sky Bet League One, Tom, this run isn't going to allow them to do that, because there are sides that already, and we don't want to keep bringing it up, but Pompey and Oxford are on 32 and 35. Derby are on 24. It's early days, but this also is a period in the season when we hit sort of 20 plus games where there's still a gap there. There's still a points gap, and you've got to be very careful that you don't get out of reach. Bolton are a fantastic example of, we thought, how are Bolton going to fare? A very good run. They're now chasing it and in a very, very good place. But Derby, that has to happen sooner rather than later, I feel.
Yeah, well, despite the Stevenage, back-to-back weekends of losing away at Stevenage and losing away at Shrewsbury, the ownership came out during the week and have completely and unadulteratedly, if that's a word, I'm trying to think of whether that is the right word.
No one's going to pick up on it. I think I wouldn't have done. You got away with that until you stopped and asked yourself.
Unadulterated is a word, which means with no qualms about it. So we'll
no doubt. There's no doubt.
Yeah. They just came out and just completely quashed any chat, rumor, whispers, whatever, that he was going to lose his job. They said they're backing him in the long term, and at which point that kind of I think that might have galvanised certain pockets of the fan base. Perhaps there'll be certain elements of the Derby have a massive fan base, which reaches far wider than just Derbyshire. They've got an incredible amount of support, and they're probably by far and away in front of Bolton and Pompey, just about, in terms of biggest clubs in League One. And you think, that when you're putting on the displays that they are, it doesn't take a lot, I don't think, for that to start to turn really sour. And the ownership have probably done the best thing they could have probably done, is come out and back him. And actually, people have turned around and gone, well, you know what, if they're going to back him, we haven't really got much choice. So let's just get behind it, try and support the club as best we can. I mean, this won't be the feeling for every single Derby County fan out there, so feel free to tell me that I'm wrong. But what I got the sense of from, I have a couple of mates who are Derby fans, and they're saying, look, if the owners aren't going to budge on it, and they're giving him, they think he's in for the long term, then we have to back it. And maybe, as you say, you're starting to see the initial signs of them putting a bit of a run together. What they can't continue to do, and actually, although the owners have come out and said, inexplicably, we're backing him, even if they have said that, if this run continues of going away to the lesser sides in League One, if you can call them that, because I think, great credit to Shrewsbury and Stevenage for getting wins against Derby County at home. I mean, those will go down as some of the results of their season. But when you have that, and then you have decent win against Exeter, emphatic win against Northampton, if in the next couple of weeks they still have that inconsistency, there are still going to be questions asked no matter what the ownership come out and say. So yes, hopefully it's the start of something. Well, from a Pompey and Oxford point of view on Derby, we hope that it's probably not, because we want them to be sort of avoiding those top echelons where we're expecting them all to be for as long as possible. But from a Derby perspective, it will certainly be welcome news that when was the last time they turned over a team 4-0 at home or in any game in League One? They haven't done that all season, have they? You've got to look back to kind of 4-2 win away at Peterborough for the last time where they seriously put on a show. So that'll be good confidence boost. We know football games are all about confidence. It's all about, which trajectory you're on. It's all about momentum. And for a club the size of Derby, I think that's even more the case. It's the same at Pompey. You're basing, you can see when a team goes 2-3 up, everything starts to fall for you, doesn't it? Those misplaced passes don't happen. The ball just reaches its destination without too much effort, or without seemingly too much effort. So in that sense, it's good to see. Let's keep our eye on it and see. We'll come back here in a month or so time. And if we see a Derby resurgence, Jack, maybe they won't be in surprise package. Maybe they'll be in the look who's done really well this month.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of doing this show every month, like you say there. There's that level of the unknown, and also the ability to look back and compare on your thoughts after only a month of football, which feels like we do this really often, but there's been a lot of games played since we last spoke. Again, that's the beauty of this conversation that we have every single month. Let's touch on the individual awards. I thought it was last time. It's not. I skipped ahead. We're, of course, only now on the Player of the Month category and conversation. Tom, you've got one name you've already mentioned in the show that you've got to put forward, and I would agree, a Pompey midfielder and a good friend of yours. I won't say off camera. Let's just no, let's not go there. You've got a very good relationship with Joe Morrell, Tom.
Where are you going to go?
Oh well, he's a really, really good friend of yours, isn't he? As you make aware all the time.
Not that much of a good friend.
He really is a good friend. He is a really good friend.
I'd like to think. I tried to tell him that my nephew was named after him, and he wasn't having any of it. But
that was in the video, wasn't it? He said he's definitely not named after me.
Yeah, and Anyway, yes, he is. He's the literal consummate professional, mate. I love him to bits, and I think even if you call it a relationship, it's not really. I've been lucky enough to be able to spend some time, quite a lot of time with the guy, and I know. To be fair, Jack, I probably know his parents better than I know him. This funny. Did I send you that message?
Which one? You are in regular contact with his mother.
I am in regular contact. Well, I am in regular contact with his mother, which I'm always amazed by. She's an absolutely lovely person, and his dad's a legend as well. And so's Joe, so it kind of runs in the family. But she messaged me saying, whose smoke alarm was that on 4-0 Sunday Live? We checked in the house while we were watching to see if it was us. And I was like,
that is always weird when you don't know who's watching.
I just had
I
visions
don't
of
know.
Sean Morel walking around the house going, is it us or is it Aaron? It's like, fish tank. But it was fish tank, and I had to explain. But then I put, I was thrown a little bit by the YouTube issues, and she put, oh, it was fantastic as it always is. And that made me smile. So that was good. Thanks, Sean, if you're watching.
It is your player of the month.
Might not be. And here we go. Yeah, with player of the month. And, away from all of that, take all that away, he gets a lot of mentions from me, but it is really worth underlining. He is, and John Messino's come out and said it, he's playing his best football he's ever played for Pompey right now. And I think that is completely true. And I think even probably Joe would admit that himself. Do also want to mention Bishop's been in 2 of the 5 teams of the week on FotMob this month. Scored a handful of goals, really good to see. It was a brace against Port Vale. I think it's 5 for the month, or maybe 4 goals in 5, something along those lines. So that's good to see.
Good ratio.
You got a couple of others as well. We've got a Blackpool shout, Derby shout, and then a final one, which I think is probably going to win it. It will be between him and Joe, I think, for my last one on my list. But hit me with yours.
Yeah, I've got Corey Blackett-Taylor of Charlton. Really, really impressed by him. Like I say, there you've put a lot of names forward. You put Mendes-Lang forward as well on the document. Colby Bishop, Alfie May. I think again you're talking about players that have really stepped up. Alfie May in recent weeks is taking this Charlton team to, again, what looked like a really slow start, but we know how important his goals are, and we know that his goals right now are impacting their run in a fantastic way. Even when they lost to Lincoln, he still scored in that game, and against Wigan he was sublime and a fantastic striker that this Charlton team have been actually screaming out for quite a few seasons now. They've got talent in that team like Lieburn, who's also a striker, but Alfie May, he's a proven striker. He's experienced, but he's proven in Sky Bet League One. And there was always that conversation when he moved, he could do it at Cheltenham, and no disrespect to Cheltenham, they're not on the same level as Charlton when it comes to size, but most importantly, I think expectation. But he's still scoring a brilliant number of goals, and it is a big reason why this Charlton team are improving, I think, under Michael Appleton every single week, even with a couple of blips here and there. So really impressed by him. Yeah, I think there's got to be a bit of a conversation about who does win it. Morale's been great. I think Oxford, you probably have to put McGuane in there, and Greg Lee. I've been really impressed by those two as well. I'm happy. You know what? We'd say it every week. It's picking one so difficult. I'm happy to share it. I think, to be honest, Alfie May and Joe Morel should be given a mention, and both of those deserve. And also, very different players impacting their team in very different ways. Maybe how far could we go with this? We need a player of the month for every position. I mean, as a striker, it has to be Alfie May, with Colby Bishop quietly behind him. But as midfielders go, Joe Morel has really impacted this Pompey team, even with the likes of Marlon Pat not being there and him stepping up brilliantly.
That's the massive thing, is the captaincy role that he's had to fulfill as well. That added bit of kind of impetus to, you look after your teammates, having chats in the ref's ear, all that kind of thing. Just the sign of the other bits and pieces go with it. But 7 goals for Alfie May is absolutely undeniably exceptional. So, that's, I really hope he's having an off day on November the 11th. I really do, Jack. I really hoping he's not great.
He's definitely the type of player, though, that you go, if someone's going to score, Alfie May right now for Charlton is that goal scorer, because he does. Exactly. He's leading the charts when it comes to output for Charlton. Manager of the month. Also, before we do this, we did this briefly last month. Manager of the month. We also sort of tied that into manager and manager casualties. Only one this month. Joe Barton lost his job, of course. That was the only one that happened, I believe. I've sort of scanned through these teams. I think he's the only one that has been sacked. A few more that could happen. I think Sellers at Reading has got to be hanging on with dear life. I think the fact that there's so much going on behind the scenes is the reason why he's still in the job. I think if that was any other football club in any other circumstance, he has to be sacked. But I mean, there's a joke on T-Love about Matt Taylor at Shrewsbury that he has lost his last 2, but we'll have to see. I mean, he's still in a job every week. We seem to think it might, and when it does happen, it will be someday. Not for Matt Taylor and not for Shrewsbury, but there is an ongoing joke there that he will be sacked eventually. But only one casualty, Tom. Joe Barton for Bristol Rovers, a window that we thought in the summer looked to set up a fantastic squad, and a squad definitely looking to be competing around that top 6 or pushing to be in that top 6. Yeah. But so far, the reason why he has been sacked is because the performances and the results haven't quite lived up to that.
He was a dead man walking, wasn't he? When you start calling out players left, right and centre, the Luke Thomas situation comes to mind. We were all sat there. We discussed it on T-Lot. Me and you discussed it privately. I think we might have even discussed it here on this series. But you can't be doing that. And unfortunately, to me, it seems like Joey Barton kind of has a bit of a lifespan with these kind of players. His Napper's made the point that he spent pretty much exactly the same amount of time in charge of Fleetwood as he did Bristol Rovers. I know there's kind of, it's one of those where it felt like everyone at Bristol, or even from an outside perspective, it felt like the love-in with Joey Barton was exclusively Bristol Rovers related. I don't think there's any other fan base in League One that liked Joey Barton, particularly in majority terms. I know Pompey fans had a real problem with him and wouldn't necessarily say whether I'd associate or not associate myself with that, and I'm sure you'd be the same, but the kind of we'll finish above Pompey, you're not going anywhere comments. It's always, and I think he mentioned about your pitch, didn't he, when he played you? Did he not say there was something wrong with the pitch?
The pitch wasn't even, or
it's
too
never
long.
Joey Barton's fault, is it? That's the thing. And
but
finally,
will that ever?
What he deserved from it?
Will that ever mean that there is going to be a lack of jobs available to him? Because he's going to upset every single. He seems to upset every single football club. I don't think any League One club are touching with a barge pole right now, but he will turn up somewhere with a position, won't he? You kind of just know it. So it's a weird one. Talk about failing upwards. I really don't have a great deal of admiration or respect for the bloke, I'm afraid, Wardy, personally. I don't think and off the field issues allegedly don't always help your opinion.
Exactly.
But
anyway.
on more positive news, manager of the month, you put Messino down. I think he won it last month. I think he probably will win it again.
Are you ever going to call him John Messino, or is he always going to be Messinio?
Messino all the way. I think Ian Evatt will get into the hat for sure. I think Darren Ferguson, of course, at Peterborough will. I even think Barnsley. Collins, I think you definitely have to put him in that conversation
his name,
as well.
then.
I did. I had to sort of. I think Barnsley and their manager that I've completely forgotten. I believe it is Collins. I think it is. I always forget their Barnsley manager's name. Apologies. But I think there'll definitely be conversation there. But Messinio, I think he does win it because you've been the best team this month and he's the manager of the best team this month. I think it sometimes has to be as simple as that.
Yeah, long may it continue. I think. I don't know whether we'll win back-to-back League or Manager of the Month awards in terms of the official. Obviously, it's nothing on the Jack Ward Football Podcast, but what the official EFL people give the manager to. But yeah, I mean, it's going really well. Let's not get too carried away with the whole look how great this is going. He will be the first one to remind you there's 31 league games to go, and we may well come on here next month, Jack. We'll be talking about. Talking about a completely different story. So, I mean, I think the shout for Bolton, I think, is a big one. I think Ian Evatt's had a really good month, and I think to be closing that gap at the pace that they are is something that is really worth mentioning. But even, I think maybe they obviously won't be shouts for it, but I think we've mentioned them already, but you've got to throw Lee Johnson in there for at least a mention, and you've also got to throw, Jesus Christ,
Dino at Burton? No.
Yeah, you could throw him in there.
Darryl
Clark, who's gone to Cheltenham. Barnsley. Jesus Christ. What a disaster of a minute of that episode.
It's the end of the show.
No one's watching. But yeah, those would be the two, just the little honorary mentions to come in, steady a ship that looks like it's sinking. Yeah, that takes quite a lot of doing, and it's starting to develop. So a big shout out to those two as well.
What a month. Lots of different things have happened, and it's been another one that we wouldn't have predicted at the end of September. And
great show as well.
A really good show. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Of course, this will be coming to you at the end of November. We'll be hitting December next time. I mean, this is flying by, and then after that, it'll be after Christmas. I mean, that is just a scary
We need to think about how we're going to do that, by the way. We haven't discussed that yet, have we?
Yeah, Christmas period does provide issues. We might do, and again, I've just thought of it on the top of my head, we might do a Christmas special for it. There's options out there. And that would be nice, wouldn't it? We could just sort of put some Santa hats on and make it more festive. I don't know how we can make this more festive. It's not a very festive show. I guess we'll be speaking about games that happened over Christmas. That does help.
That helps.
I don't know, pull a cracker at the start. There's options out there, but again, we're only in November. Let's calm down. Until next time, I've been Jack. Tom has been a fantastic contributor, as he always is on this series. Tom, have you enjoyed it? If you haven't, just say you have. It makes it easy for everybody.
Whether I have or I haven't is irrelevant. Yeah. It's been great. Loved it loads. Thank you all for sticking with us right to the end, and we'll see you next month.
Take care, everybody. Goodbye.